Hello and welcome to the second part of this video for Carveco Maker. My name is Leighton and I'm going to be showing you how to machine this part. So in the first video we took a look at the basically designing this part, very basic part to get you going. And in this video, we're going to take a look at machining it. And I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have some problems with the text because I've made sure that I've used a font that I know that I'm going to probably have some problems with. So I'll show you how you can machine this. So the first thing that we're going to do is to machine the text. So to get to the machining options, you have a few up here, but to reveal all of them, what I would advise to do is to select toolpaths over onto the right hand side here. And it opens up all of the toolpath options and operations. So for this, I'm going to create some V-bit carving. So I want to carve this text into the piece of wood that I have using a V-bit tool. So if I select to create a V-bit carving toolpath, it opens up the dialog box. Now, don't be too worried if this is the first time that you're seeing one of these dialog boxes. They're pretty much similar. So if you understand one of them, you'll probably get to grips with all of them quite easily. So what I would do is just start from the top and work your way down. A lot of the options you won't even use. So for this, what I'm going to do is just literally come down to carving tool and select a tool. So if I click to select, this opens up what we call the tool database. So this is basically a repository of all of your tools. Now if I just minimize that, this is probably what you will see when you first use Carveco Maker. Now these tools have all been installed by Maker. That's not to say that you want to change them. A lot of people probably won't use these tools. They'll use the tools that they've bought from a manufacturer and enter in the recommended settings that they have from them. A lot of the settings in these tools are quite conservative, to be honest. So let me come down to inch tools and I'm going to select a V carving tool and I'm going to select a 1¼ inch 90-degree V-bit. Now the way that this works is you can see here that this is a V-bit, so it's got this point on there. What this will do, it will try to get in between the vectors. So when you have basically a large width that it can get into, it will go deeper. Smaller and narrower width, it will go shallower. So this is what creates sort of a 3D sort of effect when you're creating V-bit carving. Okay, so let's select that tool. And good thing to do, good habit to get into is to, under width and depth of cut information, is click refresh. Make sure that you have the vector selected. Click refresh and it will basically tell you how deep it can get in or how deep it wants to go. Now sometimes if you have something that's quite wide, let's say for instance if I were to try to V-bit carve that, there's pretty much no limit to how far down it can go because it's going to try to get in between both of these vectors. So if I were to refresh that, you can see that it's trying to get down 3 inches. Now normally this would give me an error message. So Carveco Maker doesn't know how thick my material is. So what we'll do, we'll set up the material. So if you come down to the bottom, you've got click to define material. So if I click there, this opens up a dialog which asks you for the material thickness. So at the moment it's 0 inches. So let's make it 3/4 of an inch. And then you can set your material Z0 to be at the top or at the bottom of the material, dependent on however your CNC is set up. Select OK. So now that that's set up, what I can do is rotate that around, and you can see that I've got my material block set up. Now if I were to calculate that, it would give me an error message. So basically this is telling me that it's going to cut through the material base. So it's telling me there that it's going to cut 3 inches deep. My material's only 3/4 of an inch, so it's going to cut into my bed of my CNC by 2¼ inches. So I probably don't want to continue with that calculation. Okay, so just gives you a warning just in case you are going to cut through the bed. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select the text and try to machine that. So if I click refresh, now I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get an error here. Okay, so that's what I wanted. I wanted it to say that. I wanted it to say that there are vector intersections. Now what's happening here is that the graphic designer, when designing this, didn't really pay too much attention to how accurate it was. Just wanted it to look nice, basically. So we've got a problem because we need it to be quite accurate so we can machine it. Because vector intersections, the computer doesn't know where to put the tool. So select OK, and what I'm going to do is select a plan view of this. And I'm going to close the V-bit carving for a moment. I'll show you how you can sort this out. So if I zoom in, what you could do is go around all of this and try to find anywhere that had a problem, like so, and just literally pan over and try to find somewhere. Now, I'll be completely honest, this would take you quite a long time to do. So a quick way to do this is if you select the text and then select this tool up here called the Vector Doctor. Now what the Vector Doctor does is basically if you ignore all of this here and come down to identify problems, and what it will do, it will find coincident points, and what we're interested in is vector intersections. Okay, so it will find any areas that have problems. So if I select identify and then let's pan over, you can see that I've got 2 red circles here. Now these red circles basically tell me that there's a problem there. So if I were to zoom in on this, I would probably find a problem in there. So if I go to the O, zoom right in, you can see that I've got 2 circles here and the text seems to be sort of overlapping. So you can see here that I've sort of got 2 vectors going over the top of each of us. Something's going on that isn't correct. Okay, so I need to sort this out. So if I zoom out, what I can do is edit this. So if I were to try to edit this at the moment, it wouldn't work. The reason being is that this is all grouped together. So in the previous video, I explained that purple means that all of the vectors are grouped together. So you can't do this if they're purple. So what I need to do is ungroup them. The best thing to do with text is to right click on it and then ungroup all. Because if you just ungroup vectors, it will still keep the O as one letter. So it will still have a group within a group. So what I need to do is ungroup all, and then it will all become pink. So now I can just select that internal portion of the O. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit. Now what we're going to do with this is do something called node editing. So I'm going to edit this. So if you go over to here when the vector is selected, this opens up something called node editing. And this basically gives you all of the points on this vector. So you can grab one of these and basically change the shape of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select a couple of these. So maybe that one, right click on it, and then I'm going to select cut vector. Maybe that one, right click on it and cut vector. Okay, so what's happened there is that I've broken this up into two separate vectors. So whatever the problem that I had here, I'm basically going to delete it. So if I press delete on the keyboard, it will delete it. Now what I want to do is to basically join this back up again. So if I select that there, and rather than just draw a line to go in between there, you have options where you can close the vector. So if I come down here, you can see that I've got close vector with a curve. Now, this may not be on yours by default. If you take a look on the bottom right of that icon, you can see that there's a white triangle. Now that means that there's a flyout menu. So if I left click and hold it down, you can see that the menu flies out. So if I come across to close vector with a curve, you can see that basically what it's done, it's created a curve between the 2 points. Okay, so if I zoom back out and select all of that text again, and then identify, it should get rid of that marker on the O. Okay, so I haven't got a problem there anymore. Now this one is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes you get, let me just zoom in, make sure that it's not an intersection. Right, so that's not an intersection. So I've zoomed in really far there and I can't see an intersection. Sometimes there are certain nodes that do not work properly. Now, you may be able to get around this and it may not cause any problems. So what I'm going to do is come out of this and try to machine it with that problem. And I think that it will probably work. If it doesn't, I'll come back into it and change it. So let's close that vector doctor and let's select the text. Open up my toolpaths. Now you can see that I've still got my VBIT carving there. Now it's entirely up to you. You can basically right click and delete that if you want to and just start again, create a completely new VBIT carving, or you can double click on that and it basically retains all of that information and you can recalculate it. So if I were to select the vectors there, click refresh, you can see that it hasn't thrown up the error now. So the problem that I had was with this O here, that point. There is a vector intersection in there. Okay, so when you get the hang of doing this, it's very easy to sort out and you can do it quite quickly. Okay, so with that, I'm going to select to calculate now. Okay, so that's worked and you can see all of these lines over the text. So I'll explain what those are. So let me just close the VBIT carving. And then you can see here it's called VBIT carving. Now, if you wanted to, you could, when creating the toolpath, give it a name down here, or you can right click on it and give it a name here. I'll just call it Leighton carving. Okay, just so you know what it is. Now, if I rotate this around, as I said in the previous video, I like to rotate in the 3D view so I can see what the toolpaths are actually doing. Sometimes, especially for various depths, for instance, you can't really see it in the 2D view or a top-down view in the 3D view. So what I'm going to do is rotate this around. So do this, middle mouse button, hold it down and rotate. Now, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but don't worry, you'll get the hang of rotating that around. So here you can see this blue line here lots of blue lines. These are basically the rapid moves that the tool's going to take on the CNC. So it's basically when it's in fresh air, and then when it plunges down into the material. Okay, so if I zoom in on the L here, you can see lots of different lines. I'll just explain what these are. So the grey line that you can see at the top, this is a 2D preview. You can turn that off by selecting the first light bulb over on the right hand side. Under either toolpaths, these turn all of the toolpaths off. So if you've got multiple toolpaths, the toolpaths light bulbs will turn all of them off. Or you can turn off individual ones. So if I turn off that one, it turns off the grey preview. If I turn off that one, that's the 3D preview. Okay. All that this is doing is turning the visibility on or off. It's not deleting the toolpath, it's not adjusting it in any way, it's just turning them on or off. What I like to see is the red toolpath so I can see where it's actually going down to the depth. Okay, and you'll find it a lot more useful in the next toolpath that we do. So that looks okay. It looks as though everything's worked okay. So I'm just going to turn that off, go back to toolpaths, and this time I'm going to create a pocket or a recess for the circles. So to do that, we use the area clearance tool. So to do that, select there, create area clearance toolpath. I'm just going to move that over so I can select it. So select that circle. Now, you can do this whilst rotated around. It doesn't really matter. If you find it easier to do this on a top-down view, then feel free. I just find it saves hassle having to keep on rotating the model around to do it whilst it's in 3D. Right, so selected both of the circles and make sure that you've got selected vectors on there. Start depth is 0. Finish depth, let's say I want to do this 1/4 of an inch. Okay, add a tool to this. So let's use, let's say, a 1/4 inch end mill. Click select, and then it gives you the options down here. Now, what you can also do with this is add multiple tools. So if you're doing something, let's say, like the text, if you were machining that, obviously you wouldn't be able to get into the corners. What you can do with this is add smaller tools. So if I were to add, say, a 1/16 of an inch tool, it would add it to it. And what this would do, the 16-inch tool would only get into the areas where the 1/4 inch couldn't get into. Okay, so it does what we call rest machining. So it machines the rest. Okay, now obviously I don't really need it for this because they're circles. So the 1/4 inch is going to get rid of all of that material. So if I remove that, you can see below that I've got all of these different options. Now, let's say, for instance, I wanted to change the spindle speed of this tool to 18,000. Okay, so I can do that on here. Now, all that this will affect is this particular toolpath. So this toolpath is going to run at 18,000 RPM. If I wanted to change it forever, then I would have to do that using the tool database. So I'd need to go into there and edit the tool in there rather than doing it here. Because if I don't do that, every time that I select this tool, it will be 15,000. Just for this one toolpath, it's 18,000. Okay, make sure that you've got the tool number set up correctly. If you've got a single-headed machine and you haven't got a tool changer, most cases it's always going to be tool number 1. If you have a tool changer, make sure that you've got the tool set up to match whatever's in the carousel. Okay, so I'm going to set this like this. Now, keep in mind that the step down is 0.1 of an inch. So what this is going to do, it's going to divide how many 0.1s can get into 1/4 of an inch. So it's going to do 3 different passes for me. So if I select calculate, and then I'll just turn off the 2D preview and just zoom in on this circle here. Just rotate around so you can see the different toolpaths. So here you can see I've got 1, 2, 3 toolpaths. Okay, so that's all done by this step down. So if I wanted to do this, let's say in 2 toolpaths or 2 cuts, let's change that to 1.25, so 1/8 of an inch. Select calculate, turn off the 2D preview, and you can see that it's got 2 different toolpaths or 2 different cuts, step downs. Okay, so that's how you change how many passes that you want to use. Now, if I take a plan view of this and we take a look at it, you can see what's happening here is that it's coming across in X and then coming round, coming back across in X, stepping over in Y. This is probably most useful for squares or rectangles, for instance. For doing something that has any sort of shape to it or form, I would probably use the offset strategy, because what this does, it offsets the actual vector and it just saves you a bit of time. So if I select offset and calculate that, you can see it's doing a circle and then stepping out and then doing another circle. So if I turn off that 2D preview, rotate around again, so you can see it. You can see it's just a lot more efficient. Okay, so that appears to be okay. So let's close that, and then let's zoom out so we can take a look. Okay, so that looks okay. Right, so let's drill some holes. Now, I only want 1/4 of an inch holes, and I know that these circles that I have are 1/2 inch diameter. So what I'm going to do is not worry about it, because what the drilling toolpath does, it just basically uses the center of those holes. So if I turn the visibility off of those, select the 2 circles, and then go to toolpaths, let's select drilling. It automatically assumes that the finished depth is going right the way through the material, so be careful with that, just in case you don't want it to do that. In this case, I do. The tool, let's select a 1/4 of an inch end mill. Now remember, these are 1/2 inch holes, and I'm going to select calculate now. So what it does, it basically just uses the center of the holes. They don't even have to be circles. If they weren't circular, you could just select all selected vectors and it would find the center point of those vectors. Okay, so let's close that. That looks okay. And let's go to toolpaths again, and I'm going to cut the part out. Okay, so to cut the part out, you can see that the start point is there, so it's going to start cutting there. And I'm going to create a profile toolpath. Now, I'm not going to worry about any of these options. I'm going to deal with that in a later video when we get a bit more in depth. So you've got profile, which is outside. So what this does, it moves the diameter of the tool to be on the outside of the line. So it will cut to this size. Okay. If you had it set to along, what would happen is it would cut along the line, and it would be, in this case, if I select a 1/4 inch tool, it would be 1/8 of an inch smaller. Okay. If I set it to inside, it would be 1/4 of an inch smaller. Okay, so this is how you determine whether something's an inside or an outside cut. Okay, so let's select the drop down and let's do this in maybe 3 passes. So let's do 0.25 steps. And you've also got options to add lead in, lead out moves, ramping moves, and bridges. So lead in, lead out moves mean that the tool plunges outside of the shape and then comes into the shape to create a smooth transition. It's useful if you get maybe chipping, say for instance, on a material. You've also got ramping moves. So again, what this does is it comes down at an angle in Z. So this is useful if, say for instance, the material that you're cutting is burning. So if you plunge right down in wood, let's say for instance, using a compression tool, it's going to burn the wood. So what this would do is it would just ramp down into the material and it would generate less heat basically. Also, if you were doing say laminates or something like that, it would reduce the chipping on there. I've also got add bridges. So what this would do is if you were doing something that was quite small, let's say for instance, and you couldn't clamp on there or the vacuum bed didn't hold it, what this would do, it would keep a piece of material or pieces of material attached to the piece that you're cutting out. So it would keep it attached to the skeleton of the material so it wouldn't move. Okay, so just going to select calculate now. You can see if I turn off all of the toolpath 2Ds there, you can see that I've got 3 different toolpath cuts there and it looks okay. Now, what I want to do is to actually see this before I send it to the CNC. As I can imagine, because this is your first project, you'll probably be a bit wary of sending this to the CNC machine and sort of be a bit scared of whether it's going to cut properly. So what we're going to do is just basically simulate it and you'll be able to see exactly how it cuts before sending it to the CNC machine. So it saves you a lot of heartache. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is just show you how you can edit the order of these. So let's say the drilling, I want to actually do that before I create the recess or the pocket. So what I can do is left click and just drag it above area clear. Okay, and it just moves it. You've also got move up and down arrows here if you want to use it that way. If you want to edit any of these toolpaths, just literally double click on them and then you can edit them and just calculate it again. Okay. Right, so let's simulate this. There are 2 ways that you can simulate this. So if I right click on toolpaths and simulate all toolpaths, this will basically just simulate all of the toolpaths. Just give me a really quick simulation. Okay, so I know exactly what's going to happen. Okay, now you can see, I can tell that because this is quite close to this edge, I think I've done something wrong with the profile. So this is quite useful before you actually go to machine it. So if I right click on that simulation, delete it, you can see that it takes me back to my material, but I can't see anything. The reason being is that it's turned off all of the vectors and it's also turned off my material block. So if I want those back on, the material block is here. So these are all the view options. So material block is here and the vectors are here. So this controls the vector visibility. So if you want to turn them on or off, click there. Okay, so if I click on this profile, you can see there that this is quite a distance away compared to how I had it. So I think that I've got it set up wrong. I think that I've set it to inside or along. So if I double click on the profile, you can see that I've got the profile set to inside. So I need to change that. Change it to outside. Click calculate. And that should be cutting it on the outside. So if I right click, simulate all toolpaths, you can see that that looks a lot better. There's more of a distance between that hole. Okay, so it gives you a visual representation before sending it to the CNC. Now, another way that you can do this to simulate it, because that was quite fast and I couldn't really see what was happening. So what we can do is delete that simulation. I'll turn these back on. Now, what you can do is when you select one of the tool paths, so if you can't see them, just click on that arrow there. You can see the tool paths. If you right click on there, you'll get another option called Simulation Control Bar. Now, what this does, it allows you to see where the tool's actually going. So if I click on that, and you get this control bar, you also get this wireframe tool. So if I select play, I can see exactly where the tool is going. Okay, do the same for the others. So drilling, do the same for this one. Now, if there's one that you're not too fussed about and you don't want to see the tool, you can always simulate the tool path, and that will basically give you a fast simulation of that one tool path. Okay, so that's cut out okay. All appears to be fine. I can send it to the CNC machine. Now, if I wanted to send this maybe to a customer or someone just for approval, or I just wanted a better representation of what it was going to look like, what I can do is make it look a bit better. So if I go to simulation and then come down to here to delete the waste material. Now, what happens is normally that would be delete pick material. So what happens here is Carveco Maker will automatically delete the waste material if you click there. Sometimes, I'll be completely honest, it will get it wrong. That's because sometimes the waste material, what it thinks is waste material, is actually something that you would like to keep. So maybe you have a hole in here that you want to keep, and it would delete it. So what I tend to do is to either delete pick material, or if it's one object that I want to keep, just keep pick material and then just select there, and it would delete everything else. So I can then close that. Now, you see this origin point that I've got down here. If I want to not show that, what I can do is go up to view and then show origin. Let's turn that off. Okay, and then let's add a bit of color to this. So if I go to depth color and select apply, it becomes black. So anything that has been cut will be black. Now that's denoted by what the primary color is. So if I change the primary color, you can change whatever color is being shown. If you want to add your own colors to this, right click on the gray area and add colors. And then, I don't know, let's do a funky green color. Let's just move this around like so. And then just add that to custom colors. And then select OK, and it will be that green color. Okay. Now, if I want to change the gray area, the actual material, click material, so simulation default, come down to any one of these options, let's say light oak, select apply, and you can see that it's added this light oak effect. Now I probably want to maybe bring that back to black so I can see it a little better. And you can see my finished piece. So if I wanted to, I could send this to a customer or just save it for my own purpose. Okay, so if I go to toolpaths there, what I can do is to save this out now to the machine. What I may want to do first of all is click on toolpath summary. So what this does is it gives me a summary of all of the tools that are being used and the speeds and feeds. So I could save this as a document, or I could print this out just to take to the shop floor or take to my shed or whatever I'm machining. Okay, so let's close that. And to save the toolpaths so you can send it to your CNC, just click to save toolpaths. All that this does is it converts the information from Carveco Maker into a format that your CNC will understand. Now, here you can see that I've got all of these tool number ones. So if I had a tool changer, I wouldn't have all of them as tool number one. The V bit would be set up as a different tool, and these tools would all be the same tool because they're all a 1/4 inch end mill. So I would just need to make sure that I had that set up as a different tool number, choose the machine file format, and then save it. Okay, and then I can send that to the machine. If I haven't got a tool changer and I had to change the tool manually, what I would normally do is select all of the tool paths, move them over onto the left-hand side, and just keep latent carving. Now, if you have all different tools that you're using, a quick shortcut to do all this is to just leave them all in there and save tool paths to separate files. Saves you having to move each one over and do each one individually. Now, because these are using all the same tool, I'm just going to do it using this method. So I'm going to call this maker one, and I'm going to browse. Let's stick that on my desktop, and I'm going to call it my first maker project. Open that. Let's call it maker one and select open. Okay, so that's where it's going to save to. Now you could also browse, if you were doing this on the network, you could just browse straight into your CNC machine if you wanted to. Right, so we've also got append toolpath details to file name. So if I select that, what it will do is latent carving and this detail here, it will add it to the file name so I know what it is. Got add home move at end of files. So when it's finished, it's going to go back to the 00 position. And then most importantly, machine file format. So this is a list of different machine manufacturers. There are hundreds in here. Probably more than likely have your machine in there. If it hasn't, get in touch with us and I'm sure we can sort something out. Now, what these are basically converters. They're called post-processors. So what they do is they convert the information from Carveco Maker into a format that the CNC understands. So if I were to come down to maybe a generic G code, so if you have an imported machine, it will more than likely just use generic G code. So I'm going to choose the G code arcs and then select save. So that's saved it into that folder. So now what I'm going to do is grab latent carving and then grab these three and then move those across and then save those as well. So if I take a look at that folder now, you can see that I have these two different files in here. And if I open one of them up, so let's open this one up. Now, I've already associated this with WordPad. So if you right click on it and select open with, and then just choose WordPad, just double click on it, and you can see that it's just all what we call G code or NC code. So it's just commands, basically functions telling the CNC what to do, and it's got coordinates in there just telling it where to move to so it can cut the part out. So that brings an end to our first project in Carveco Maker.